Well, a warm welcome to this talk. And we're going to cover some of the new information that's come out for the end of January from the British resources and government on Omicron. Now, wherever you are, it's very likely you're going to be exposed to Omicron in the next few weeks if you haven't been already. It's growing in the United States, it's growing in the United Kingdom, it's growing in Europe, it's growing in Canada. And as we saw, thankfully, the Ugandan doctors were pleased it was growing in Uganda as well. And of course, the BA.2 is not a new variant. It's just a derivative of the original Omicron. So we had the original Omicron, and the BA.1 kind of went that way on the evolutionary phylogenetic tree or on the clade, and the BA.2 went that way. So it's not that the BA.2 evolved from the BA.1. It didn't. They both evolved separately, but they're both Omicron variants and behave as such. And this is what we've been anticipating for some time, but it's always good to have the confirmation of this because this is going to be everywhere. So when we said everyone's going to be exposed to Omicron, those of us that have been exposed to Omicron BA.1 so far, we're also going to be exposed to Omicron BA.2, but I'm expecting you're going to have very high levels of immunity against BA.2 Omicron and have absolutely minimal symptoms or in all probability no symptoms. Now, I can't confirm that yet, but that's what I strongly suspect because that's the most common question we're being asked. So if you've had Delta, not much protection against symptomatic Omicron. If you've had vaccinations, not a lot of protection against symptomatic Omicron, to be quite honest, as we'll see. We've got some figures on that. But you are protected against hospitalisation. If you had Omicron, you're going to be protected from Delta. And if you've had Omicron BA.1, it's looking likely that you're going to be protected from Omicron BA.2, but I can't guarantee that yet. But that's what we think. Now, I'm just going to run through some data here quickly on the graphics. Age and sex pyramid. So these are the ones that are officially genomically diagnosed of BA.2 so far in the United Kingdom. So we see males on this side, females on this side. And quite honestly, there's nothing too surprising. That's pretty well the distribution we would expect. And for those numbers, that is that looks equal to males and females to me. Now, this is the number of BA.2 cases that have been diagnosed in the world, and we see that the vast majority of them are in Denmark. Now, does this mean that the pandemic is particularly advanced in Denmark, or the BA.2 is particularly advanced in Denmark? Where last time I checked, the official figures were 66% of cases in Denmark. It's probably nearer 80% of cases now are BA.2 rather than BA.1 Omicron. But the reason is, of course, well, partly the Danes have got such good monitoring, such good genomic monitoring. Of course, the virus has to be there to pick it up in the first place, but I suspect it's in other places as well. The BA.2 is already in other places, just not picking it up anything like as quickly as we are as they are in Denmark. So that is Singapore there. That's others. That one there is the UK and the United States, where genomic sequencing is notably poor compared to Denmark, at least, much lower numbers. Now, we're going to look at this in a minute. This is BA.2 compared to BA.1. So overall growth rate, yeah, it's going to be faster. Growth advantages in transmissibility, yes. Growth advantages in terms of immune escape, probably less so. Now, I'm not going to go through this in detail because we are going to unpick that a bit as we go through, so we've got a good understanding of that. And that's just a summary of that. So growth advantage, yes. Transmissibility, yes. It's growing much more quickly than BA.1. And remember, this is BA.1, new Omicron, as opposed to... So this is BA.2, new Omicron, as opposed to BA.1, old Omicron. Now, this next graphic is slightly more complicated. Now, what we have is the S gene deletion. The original Omicron showed S gene deletion on the PCR tests, whereas the Delta was S gene positive on the PCR test. So when Omicron first came along, cases that were S gene deleted looked like that they were the new Omicron, displacing the Delta, which was S gene positive. But the BA.2 is also S gene positive. So what we would expect to see now is more and more S gene positive cases indicating BA.2. Because Delta's basically gone now. Delta's been replaced, as I must say we anticipated. So that's probably what's starting to happen. So we will start seeing, as time goes on, some more green here, indicating the S gene positivity. but it's not Delta coming back. It is BA.2 becoming more prevalent. And I've got a bit of a blow up there, and we see that percentage S gene target failure there. That's the target failure. So we'd expect that line to start going down now as we get more BA.2, which is going to be S gene positive. Hope that made sense. Here we see the change over time. So this is the original, well, not the original, but that's the alpha there. Then the delta, so that was the UK Kent mutation, as we called it in those days, the alpha. Then the beta took over. Of course, there's always going to be a splattering of more minor variants, although, so that's the delta. Here we see the Omicron really has taken over from this, and the total sequencing there, that just indicates that the data is not quite up to date. But basically, we see that Omicron now has completely taken over. So basically what's going to happen now is one shade of green will go to another shade of green, really, as the BA.1 starts to be replaced by the BA.2. So it's a bit complicated, but hope those are useful graphics. Now, we don't want to be accused of any inaccurate information, so I've put all the links to all the government sites we're going to be using here, and being very careful just to make sure we're not straying off the data pathway. So all those links are there. Peruse them at your leisure. And this is my summary and interpretation of all those sites. So official, here we have Omicron. So that says Omicron, but that's actually BA.1. Genomically sequenced, nearly 1 million of them. Pretty impressive sequencing in the UK, it has to be said. That's quite impressive. BA.2. So far, just under 2,000 officially genomically sequenced, but this number will start going up fairly dramatically soon. Assessment and rationale. BA.1 Omicron is currently the dominant variant in the UK, which we know. The risk assessment uses the characteristics of BA.1 as the baseline. So what we're doing now is comparing BA.1, because we're already assuming that, well, we are right in assuming that Delta has basically gone. We've been delivered from the Delta outbreak by the Omicron. So we're now comparing Omicron with Omicron, BA.1 with BA.2. Overall growth rate. Red, moderate. So red means there's definitely a pretty strong overall growth rate. So far, the data confidence on this is moderate. Now, this is not saying it's in doubt. It's saying that we only have moderate evidence for that so far. Soon that will become, I'm predicting, strong evidence. But this can only go on the data that we have to the data cut-off points. There is evidence of a growth advantage for BA.2 compared to BA.1 in more than one country. So that's the evidence. All countries, actually, where it's been looked at. UK data evidence of increased growth of BA.2 compared to BA.1, so it's clear on the UK data. All regions of England where there's sufficient cases to assess, so this is not just an isolated thing, this is everywhere. Observed growth advantage support by increased household secondary attack rates in the UK data as well. So the secondary attack rate is people that the individual infected person passes it on to. Now, why is this? First one, growth advantage, transmissibility. Pretty sure about that. Low level of confidence so far, but it will get bigger as we get bigger numbers. So they say it's plausible that transmissibility is contributing to growth advantage. Now, they're right in saying plausible because there's only relatively low numbers involved. In the next data release, when there's much higher numbers involved, I'm sure that'll change to high levels. Given the high secondary attack rate and apparent immune evasion, so there's high secondary attack rates, there's lack of immune evasion. So if there's lack of immune evasion, the method of increased spread and growth of the virus must be increased transmissibility. It's unclear at present how this would arise from the BA.2 mutation profile. Interesting. So the people that examine the genetic profile of the spike protein, for example, or the whole genetics of the virus, can't see yet from that why the configuration of amino acids as a result of the mutations on the virus should make it more transmissible. And yet the empirical evidence is showing that. So this is one of those cases where the empirical evidence, the epidemiological evidence, is running ahead of the laboratory evidence. It's likely the laboratory evidence will come and people will identify why it is more transmissible. But as of now, we're not sure why it's more transmissible. We just know it is. Well, we essentially know it is. Growth advantage 2, the other possible mechanism, as we've looked at many times, immune escape. Amber, not a very high risk of that, and even then we're not too sure of it. So based on early BA.2, does not appear more immune evasive than BA.1, so it's not more immune evasive. This is why I am confident that if you've been infected with Omicron BA.1, you will not be reinfected with Omicron BA.2, at least if you do, with minimal symptoms or asymptomatically. So I'm not worried about reinfection. I'm expecting good levels of natural immunity as a result of BA.1 Omicron, and I'm expecting good levels of natural immunity as a result of BA.2 Omicron. And of course, as we've said, back immunity against Delta. We have been very fortunate with this. Things are still difficult at the moment in hospitals, there's no question about that, but it would be way, way worse if this was the Delta carrying on. This is based on vaccine sera, so this is people that have been vaccinated, taking their blood, taking the antibodies from their blood. So we're not expecting significant vaccine escape. Remember, when we say we're not expecting significant vaccine escape, that means we're not expecting more vaccine escape from BA.2 compared to BA.1. A preliminary neutralisation study does not suggest a difference in neutralisation between the two. So that's looking promising, that we're not expecting significant immune escape or immune evasion. No live virus data available. So in terms of the live virus, at the moment, we simply don't know. I am speculating it's going to be good, but I don't know that for sure. We have to wait for the further data. The data could prove me wrong. I doubt it, but it could prove me wrong. Vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic disease, no suggested difference between BA.1 and BA.2. So again, looking good, no difference in symptomatic disease. Infection severity, don't know, insufficient data, we simply don't know. No systematic analysis comparing BA.1 to BA.2 are yet available. And yet from other tentative studies, we are seeing that there's no increase in pathogenicity between BA.2 and BA.1. But as they correctly say, as of now, we don't know. But I'm not concerned about it. So this takes us on to technical briefing 35, which is this one. These come out pretty well. I think these are every week from the government, and they really are pretty, they take a bit of reading, I must say, but they are very thorough. And I don't know if it's just me that I understand British cultural writing better than American writing, but I find them so much more comprehensible than CDC data. CDC papers are really hard to read. As I say, it could just be me not used to reading American data, but I find the UK ones so much easier to read than the US ones. Someone in the US, they might find it the other way around, although plenty of people in the US have criticised the relative opacity of the CDC writing. Happy with the UK writing. Considering the technical stuff they're transmitting, it's pretty good. Now, this is rather interesting. Cumulative cases in England of variant index by day since the 5th reported case. So if you take data from the 5th reported case, now of course these are all going to be different dates, but here we have, for example, the beta variant that never really took off because it was outcompeted by the delta. That was the delta on that line there. That was the so-called delta plus that you might remember. Omicron has grown much more quickly than any of them. So obviously this is not a particular time period, this is just days since the 5th reported case. So it shows Omicron has got this incredible growth advantage. It has just absolutely scooted up, even compared to Delta. And of course the Delta was much steeper than the previous variants as well, the Alpha variant, for example. But dear me, the Omicron has been fast. And it's looking like this will turn out to be advantageous compared to living with Delta for sure. And as we've said, we believe this could be the herd immunity that ends the pandemic. And I was very pleased to see the doctors from Uganda agreeing with me yesterday. I don't know whether you caught that video, or the day before. Data cut off 24th of January for BA.2. Actually, the sequencing data was only up to the 16th of January, so it's always behind, of course. 96.1% of sequence with BA.1, 3.4 with BA.2. Now we can expect that to, well, of the 16th of January. Basically, it's doubling every week at the moment, so that's getting on for, well, how long ago is it? Anyway, never mind. It's doubling about every 7 days, so it's probably going to be, probably about 14% at the moment would be a reasonable guess. 14, 15%. But of course, pretty soon, the week after, I expect that to be 28%, and then it's going to take over. I am pretty sure. A few other lineages, but not many. BA.2 does not contain the deletion at S6970. That's why, and is S gene target positive on PCR. Unlike the BA.1, which is S gene target negative, because it does contain this deletion. The proportion of S gene target failure cases is now increasing, of course, as we've just predicted here. What's 28 and 28, whatever that is. Whatever it is, 56 or something. It's going to keep doubling every week, I think. As of the 24th of January, proportion of S gene target failure cases in England was 4.4%, and a week before it had been 2.2%. So there we go. So a week after, I would expect it to be 8.8 and then take off from there. London already much higher, 9.5. Again, London leads the way, so 9.5 BA.2 cases in London with S gene positivity, because they're not Delta anymore. North East region only 0.9, which has got a bit of catching up to do. So carrying on with the growth rate, the apparent growth advantage is currently substantial, of course, as the say. Secondary attack rates in household, BA.2 secondary attack rate is 13.4% of other household members being infected once a primary index case enters the house. Other Omicron cases, it was 10.3, so slightly higher. This data is not adjusted for vaccine status, so it reflects overall growth rather than transmissibility. So that's just the blind data, not taking vaccination into account at all. So we see a slight increase there. When we take vaccination into account, I suspect that difference will become greater, but we don't know that yet. Vaccine effectiveness after 25 weeks in preventing symptomatic disease is terrible. So BA.1, if you've had 2 doses of vaccine after 25 weeks, 9% protection against symptomatic disease. BA.2, slightly more, 13% protection against symptomatic disease. Now, these are only based on small numbers yet, but it's looking positive. It's looking like BA.2, we're going to have slightly more protection from our 2 doses of vaccine than we are with BA.1. Vaccine effectiveness 2 weeks after the 3rd dose against symptomatic disease, BA.1, 63%, and again slightly higher with BA.2 at 70%. Now, the protection against hospitalisation, of course, is higher, but that is the protection from symptomatic disease. So slightly more protection from the vaccines that we already have, which of course go way back to the original Wuhan B.1.1 virus. That's what they're acting against. Slightly more protection. So it almost seems like BA.2 has kind of evolved back to being a little bit closer to the original strain in terms of its immune profile. BA.1 and BA.2 did not differ substantially in neutralisation by sera from vaccinated individuals, so that's good. The BA.2 would be a little bit better, but lab studies didn't really show that, is what they're saying. But the epidemiological data did show BA.2 gives a little more, the vaccines give a little more protection against BA.2. Right, Omicron BA.1 in care homes. So the data we have for Omicron in care homes. So this is the B.1.1.529, the original Omicron BA.1. There was rapid increase in SARS coronavirus 2 infection in care homes during December 2021. As we anticipated, there has not been an associated increase in hospital admissions. Such good news. No inference can be made regarding BA.2 yet because we simply don't have enough numbers. I suspect we will not see an increased hospitalisation with BA.2 either. Current wave of Omicron infection is unlikely to lead to a major surge in severe disease in care home populations. Excellent. With high levels of vaccine coverage and or natural immunity. And it has to be added somewhat less intrinsic pathogenicity, although that we know that from other data, not from this data. Now, what are the great and the good saying about it? Let's hope they don't disagree with me too much. Jonathan Ball, molecular virologist, University of Nottingham. The key issue is whether this variant is associated with more severe disease and if it can escape immunity delivered by vaccines. Well, we've seen that it's not escaping. It's slightly better, actually. The vaccines are slightly more effective. Early indicators suggest that the vaccine will provide similar levels of protection as we've seen for Omicron, so this is good news. Yeah, basically accept that. Or it might even be slightly better, as we've said. Whether or not it causes more severe disease will become apparent as more data is collected. Yes, he is correct, but the early intimations are encouraging. But so far, there is nothing in these early analysis for us to worry about unduly. So he's being very cautious. He's a professional scientist, of course, but he is saying, like we've been saying since we started looking at the South Africa data, we've been saying this for about 6 weeks now, to be quite honest. We're in a bit ahead of the game on this one, but it's now being substantiated by Professor Jonathan Ball, which of course is always very encouraging to me personally. Professor John Edmonds, epidemiologist, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Possible that BA.2 could take over from the original Omicron strain in the next few weeks. Well, I wouldn't say it's possible. I'd say it's pretty well certain. We've seen it's doubling every 2 weeks. The question is, of course, will we run out of people to infect? Because people that have been infected with BA.1 Omicron, I am expecting to be highly immune to BA.2 Omicron. So it could actually run out of people before it's got time to reach 100 or 98% or whatever it might get up to. But we will see. It has done in Denmark, of course, as we know. So it will do in this country. It will do in the United States. It will do in Germany. It will do in France. It will do in Canada. It will do in Australia. It's going to be the same everywhere. It's outcompeting it. Not anything like as quickly as Omicron outcompeted Delta, but nevertheless, BA.2 is outcompeting BA.1. The good news is that at present there's no evidence to suggest that it's more severe than Omicron, correct? But that's because it is Omicron, of course. The Omicron is the BA.1 and the BA.2. They are both Omicron. And the UK Health Security Agency analysis shows the vaccine appears to be as effective as against BA.1. So there you go. As we said, do check out all these references for yourself. Everything I've said is there. Wouldn't want to be fact checked by the BBC or anything like that, would we? Yeah. This is what we predicted. So to summarise, I mean, a couple of weeks ago we said there's a new variant around called BA.2. Is it a type of Omicron? Yes. Is it going to become the most prevalent type of Omicron? We said yes. A couple of weeks ago, was I worried about it? No. I'm still not worried about it. In fact, it's even more encouraging as we collect more data. So we are in the end stage of this pandemic because this is giving immunity to millions of people. As we speak, we've just got to get over the hospitalisation problem for the next few weeks. Way less than Delta, but because so many people are being infected all at the same time, that is what the issue is. That, and of course the comorbidities in our Western populations. Okay, hope that was helpful and interesting. So I think we'll probably leave that one for now because we're not too worried about it. But we will note from time to time as BA.2 does replace BA.1. And also keeps Delta away. Thank you for watching.